everyone. We're back at our Art Subway studio, and we have a new guest today, Sofia.
Hi.
Sofia is an artist, and she's a student, but she doesn't want to say the student of which institution she's in. We're just going to start
I'm
with it
nervous.
right away.
Maybe it'll slip out.
Yeah,
Anyways.
it doesn't mean like it defines you or anything.
Right.
So we just wanted to talk a little bit about your education as an artist, because I think it's interesting to know if an artist should get an education, like if it's even worth it.
That's a good question.
I guess we should start with your story. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing and when you knew you wanted to be an artist for the rest of your life.
My gosh. Yeah, that's still, I'm like, do I? I don't know. I have no idea. Well, I'm originally from Denver, Colorado. Both my parents are immigrants. A lot of first generation people would love to say that it's like my parents came here to try and give me a better life, which is very true. Being an artist or being, I guess, in the art industry or having things to do with like art and music and I guess just culture in that sense wasn't something that I was necessarily exposed to a lot. Not that it didn't really feel like a possibility, but it definitely felt like a very far-fetched dream. My mom never really deterred me from becoming an artist. I think she's always been a really big supporter of mine. Other than that, the majority of my family was like, that's such a weird, like, that's such a strange, I guess, career choice, because it doesn't officially feel like a career choice. I think everyone goes through that, so I don't think it's like necessarily a crazy life story or like upbringing experience. But I definitely felt a lot of that growing up. And I still think that sometimes. I still think, like, what the hell am I doing? I know they wanted better for me, and I know they came here for me to get a higher education and to make something of myself, but am I actually doing that? And, you know, the short answer is yes. Long answer is, like, it depends on, like, how you look at it, obviously. So I think, yeah, when I got to art school and I kind of became more independent in that sense, and decided that this is what I want my life to be, and I just want to be a working artist and create things. I think that's when it all really changed for me. Also just being in New York, obviously.
What was the main difference for you when you moved to New York City?
I mean, people really don't care. That's good and bad. They're just like, I don't care what you do. I don't care who you are. Like, just hurry up and get out of my face. Which, again, is, like, good and bad. I think, like, coming from where I'm from, and also, again, like, how my parents are, it's just, like, a very different demeanor that I really appreciated, because what I really needed was more honesty. The people that I started surrounding myself with were some of like the most free people that I'd ever met. And so I was like, I need to be that. I need to be myself, but I also need to figure out who I am. I honestly don't even remember when I had a strong interest in painting. My concentration, mostly, I'm a painter and a printmaker. I don't even remember the first time I decided to buy a canvas and paint. And that's like one of the things that I wish I did, because it was such a pivotal moment in my life.
Going back to that conversation, do you think an art school or any type of education is important for an artist?
I can't tell. That's a really good question. I mean, aside from just like the basic training, I have a lot of, you know, professors that changed my life completely. So aside from like making connections with people that I consider mentors, which are like maybe one or two, I definitely think it was the people that I met along the way, like some of my best friends that I have now that are very close to me and dear to my heart. I think I'm so grateful for them, because again, it was like a reflection, it was like a mirror, because I think we all, I mean, speaking for myself, I don't know if they feel the same way, we'll see when they see this, but I think them allowing themselves to be vulnerable and to have the strength to keep going even now, and to be in art school, it's obviously like consistently being critiqued and judged, and having to keep going in and making edits in your technique, to keep just pushing through and having that confidence in themselves, again, like really allowed me to just pick myself up and do the same.
Outside of school, what was your most impactful learning experience? I would say maybe in New York City, only like in your adult life.
I have to say Arts Avenue. I have to bring that up again. Like, it truly is, like, I think I can't think of something that gave me more, like that spurred me on more in a time that I needed it the most than the time that I was at Arts Avenue. I was maybe like 19 at the time, still pretty new to New York, and like was in school and like had just started and blah blah blah. Felt like it was the first collective and like some of the first people that gave me a chance to have a voice and to I didn't feel like an idiot. That was the best part, is like I think oftentimes as an artist and oftentimes as a creator, you're like, this is the ugliest thing I've ever made, this is the stupidest thing I've ever made, that I don't deserve anything good in life, so that's, you know, jot that down. I think in that moment, the first time that I came to you guys and like got to do that whole collaboration, and like we did the gallery and people showed up, and I was like, that's crazy that like other people other than me are like looking at my art. It was a very like impactful experience, definitely, as an artist.
Yeah. First, just thank you for just, you know, saying yes and taking the risk to do a showcase like that. And from what I remember is that you carried yourself so well. When people asked about your work, I saw you out there engaging with the people about your work and talking about it, and like it just really moved me to see, you know, your determination. And I was so happy that you reached out to us for like the opportunity to do so, because that's what Arts Avenue is, in a sense. It's just a place where everyone can connect, and a place where all artists can be seen, felt, and heard. And it goes back to what you were saying about like all artists love compliments, but in the end we want to really just serve some type of community, you know?
I guess in art school with like, or you just kind of expect things to be a lot more, again, this is like my naive 18-year-old brain, just to be a lot more liberal and a lot more inclusive, and you know, everyone that, you know, might have felt like the black sheep or like an outcast, whatever, blah blah blah, is coming together, and we're going to be this really cool, you know, group of students. And in a lot of ways it is true. And again, some of the friends that I made when I came here are like my best friends that I, so many ways they are my muse. I feel like I'm like I want to be like them because they inspire me so much, and I hopefully vice versa. Hopefully it's like a two-way street where we all inspire each other and want. But I think in art school it's so hard to do that sometimes, because you're like, I still don't really see like people that might be like me or have a similar story to me, or look not like that, or like not make work like that I'm not necessarily interested in. So I think that was dragged on a lot. My first 2 years, almost 3 years of college, where it was really just the same through for artists, where you were like, this is how a good painting looks like, this is a good technique, do that, replicate that. And I don't think a lot of people are into that. I don't think it's just me. I don't think I'm like the rebellious like art student. I think that's a very common thought. I have to go and do my own research and find out what I'm actually interested in, which again is good, but I just wish that was more implemented.
No, I think it's great that you touched upon this point, because I hear it a lot from students of other schools, prestigious schools in New York City, that they just get really surprised or even shocked sometimes of how you know, things are very conservative in there, and how they study only very specific authors, and lack of representation as well. And I think, you know, we need to talk more about that, because those schools, they have that image of, you know, being great, being powerful institutions, but they sometimes don't use that power for students' benefits, or maybe there's a generational change that they're behind on, and they are not implementing the necessary adjustments to, you know, the school curriculum or the school vision as well.
I relate to what you say about learning on your own. Even though being in school, like when I work with my work, I like to use all types of figures, and I love using silhouettes. Didn't learn that at all in college. I had to learn about an amazing Black artist named Kara Walker, who tells stories of the Black experience through silhouettes. And I was like, this is awesome. Why did I not learn this in school?
I mean, that's a great example. I think I always, in a way, she's a great sculpture artist as well. So in a lot of ways, I think she represents what a lot of us want, in terms of just like, she also kind of struggled with that in college, just being like, I want to talk about being a Black woman in America, but are people going to think that this is expected of me? Are people going to think that this is what I'm supposed to do because I'm a Black woman in America? And in reality, that's what we need. That's what schools need. That's what we all need to understand the world around us. Otherwise, we're hearing it from perspectives of people that aren't in that category, that aren't really necessarily privy to like what's actually happening and what that experience is like. I don't know what that's like. A lot of people don't know what that's like. So that's an important voice that, again, should be implemented in schools, and artists like that need to be observed and studied more, arguably more than a lot of the artists that I was forced to like do studies off of or study. And I think she should be like, honestly, in every course. I think she really changed a lot of people's lives and perspectives and views, and also just like the way that her work is considered controversial is like something that I would consider just normal, and like a voice that again needs to be heard and elevated. So do more of that. If you work for an art school, do more of that, because I think that's really that would help a lot of people, and I think that would just make stronger artists.
What are your thoughts about art school teaching ulterior career path that is not just studious, go out and get a career, in the sense that, hey, if you want to be more loosey-goosey freelance with your work, here's some resources. There's a website like the Freelance Union and stuff like that. You think that they should be teaching and implementing what you do when you get out of art school?
I can only speak for my specific school, but I feel that you get to a certain point when you're so close to graduation that you're like, so this is like this, so I'm supposed to go and do, okay, so I'll just go and do that, okay, so I'll figure it out. And like in reality, it's like they're kind of just like preparing you for something that you're not 100% on sometimes. Like I feel like, at least for me, there was a lot of lack of direction, especially being, no matter how impressionable you are as like a young adult, as a teenager, whatever age you are when you come into school, especially like if you just want to be a working artist, I feel in school it's either like, okay, so like, yeah, you have a fine arts degree, but you want to be like, you want to work in an art gallery, right? You want to manage an art gallery. That's what we think you want, so we're going to prepare you for that. In a way, it's almost twisted into being like a business, almost like a business, like how to business market school? Yourself. Yeah, almost like a business school, but like, I don't know. I think in some ways it's good and it's smart to be like, this is how you should present yourself as an artist. This is how to prepare your portfolio. That's right. This is how to get ready to, pitch your like thesis about blah blah blah, and like, and that's all well and good, but then to actually put that into practice, there's a lot of like lack of resources, and just like I felt that they kind of left a lot of us hanging. I don't want to completely like rat on them, because I think they did a lot of good for me in my life personally, and again, like going to art school, like we mentioned earlier, was a very big turning point in my life, and allowed me to be a lot more confident in myself. But I think sometimes you just like, you leave and you're like, okay, so that was a cool 4 years, like I don't know what I'm supposed to be looking at. Like I want to do so many things, but how do I get started? See, now I feel like I'm just like, art school's bad, like it's awful.
No,
but it's not like that at all.
It doesn't sound like that. I think it just sounds realistic.
Yeah. I think as much as I've been like complaining about the things that I dislike, there are, like you said, a lot of things that I really, really loved about my experience in art school. And that, again, like, some of the opportunities that I've had and some of the skill set that I've, I guess, accumulated I wouldn't have.
It's super interesting, in the end of the day, it's what you make of it for any type of institution, Right. It's the lessons that you've come back with. And from what you've told us, it feels like you've learned a lot. And it really opened you and broadened your horizons into being an artist. That being said, you're able to realistically look at some of the things that they implemented and openly criticize them as well.
Definitely one good thing about art school is like I have very thick skin now compared to when I was like 17 or 18. I really, you could tell me anything, I don't care. Like I've heard it all from my professors. I really don't care. So, it's good and bad, but I'm just like, you could really just go
It's
off
a good
on me.
quote.
I really don't
It's
care.
a good quote. I heard it all from my professor.
There's
Yeah,
nothing you can do that can break me. The
And
person who said it to me expanded upon it so badly that I stayed up for 4 nights.
Yeah.
So
exactly. Yeah. I'm
it's
just
over.
like I've already like that has been rattling around in my brain for years at this point. So I don't care. Take it as criticism, constructive or not. Just take it and go with it and try to make the best out of it.
So, from looking at your various works, you've dabbled with printmaking, sculpture, painting, knitting, wood panels, gifts, and more. And you've used various materials like acrylic markers, colored pencils, and watercolors. Do you have a different creative method for each style of art that you make?
I try to experiment with everything. Honestly, I think it's just the best way to be about life is just to like really go for it, even if it's embarrassing, even if you're awful at it the first time. Like, I just think that's really great to, I guess, exposure. With new materials, I tend to just not really go in with anything pre-planned or like anything in mind. I just experiment and I just test things out, and if I really like something, then I kind of start to construct. I don't know, I think there's a really big difference between like thinking of like a really good painting and like a very good like composition or a really good work of art and actually like bringing it to fruition. I think that is like where it gets a little dicey sometimes, because I mean, at least again, I like really tend to be discouraged if it doesn't immediately start looking like something that's in my brain. I always practice in my sketchbook just so I don't feel like I'm messing something up or like wasting canvas, which is like super easy to paint over, whatever, it's not a tragedy, but in my mind I'm like, I'm whatever, I'm like wasting material.
When you're feeling discouraged about a certain piece, how do you continue your focus to continue through it?
I try to give myself space from it. I try to distance myself both physically and like mentally from something if it's really frustrating. Again, I think that's my issue, is like I keep working it and I sometimes tend to overwork things or get so upset at it that I just like literally flip it around. I'm like, I can't look at that shit. Like, I'm sorry, I can't do it right now. But I try to sleep on it and I try to just work on something else of a completely different medium. That usually tends to work a lot. Like, I'll be working on a painting and I'm like, okay, this is trash. Like, I can't do this. And then I'll start like making a print, or I'll draw, do whatever else in my sketchbook, and then I come back to it and I have a fresh perspective on it. That doesn't always work. I think sometimes if I stay up until like 3 or 4 in the morning working on something, it ends up becoming something that's like put together and actually makes sense.
I totally relate to the idea of letting go. I've done that too with pieces where I'm like, I really love this piece, but I feel like if I keep it, I'm going to get attached to this specific style of how I draw and painted it, and I want to continue to evolve. So I will go over it, as long as you have it photographed or documented, and you have the personal memory, you can move forward,
Right.
And I also love what you said about like tying letting go to like knowing when you need to take space from a piece. And I think it's like this unsaid creative ebb and flow, even like what you were talking about outside of the art field too. I'm pretty sure you've had that in the film as well, where you're like, no, I gotta get away from this. If I keep doing this, it's gonna be terrible. And then there are other times when you kind of just know if you keep going the course and finish it, it'll be finished.
Right.
And I think that's just something instinctual that you get throughout the years of creating. When you need to stop, or you get to a feeling where you need to stop, versus like you get to a feeling where if I just crank out a couple more hours, if I pull an all-nighter, I will officially be done with this.
Right.
And it's just finding that nice scale on that nice weight on the scale. It's just a really gorgeous piece, and seeing it in person, like online, just doesn't do it justice. What were some of the techniques that you implemented to create this piece, and were those techniques at the time new to your repertoire?
Well, thank you for saying that. That's really nice. This piece specifically was more of like, it started out as like experimental, because I've had the issue of not being able to have a very condensed palette if we're speaking like technically. My problem is always that I kind of just go crazy with colors, and while that can work, I think I needed to focus on being more unifying as a painter, focusing on everything circling back. So just kind of how like compositions work, it's the same for color, as you know. It all has to kind of like meet an endpoint. And so I think that was like something that for some reason I really struggled to grasp throughout school, and like even just like in my own personal work, I got so distracted by other factors that I didn't really have like the time or patience or I guess knowledge even or experience to understand how that works. Putting, again, like color theory, you take a class, it's fine, but putting that into practice is like, for some reason it's so hard to do. Like you know what you're supposed to do, and then you kind of sit down and you're like, this makes no sense to me, and like I've just ruined everything, which again is like pretty normal. But yeah, for this painting I felt that I was really going to be strict on myself and try to limit myself really and have some self-control. So I stuck with, I think maybe like 3 or 4 colors, including white, which I typically try to stay away from like using white and black, just because I feel like at least for me, the way I use them, I think that it tends to flatten my paintings and like my compositions. So I tried to use like as little as the white as possible and just stick to like green, yellow, and like red and blue, and then mix those up. And obviously, like, you know how a palette works, so that's kind of how I got there.
This is a perfect segue to the forbidden door of art.
Ooh.
You mentioned like, you know, there's a line between like, you know, reference and plagiarism. So let's talk about reference for a second. The big R word that no artist wants to talk about.
That no one uses reference.
Yeah, no one uses. All from your imaginations. It all comes from your imagination. We're mythical creatures that just produce.
That's how it goes.
That's how it goes. End of story.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on references, and what are your thoughts about artists potentially opening it up and talking more about them using references in their work?
Well, first of all, I think references are a big part of literally any form of making art. Like, I think unless you're a computer, literally, and you just can have images in your brain and know proportions correctly, if that's like obviously like the style that you're going for, to be proportionally correct and just anatomically correct, etc., I think good for you.
But
most
even
people
then,
that I know
you need references
exactly.
for that, to study the body so intimately.
Right, exactly. So I think that's great if you can. I don't think I've ever been able or will be able to do that, just because I think what I often do is use myself as a reference. I tend to like, if I can't find a picture on the internet, I'll literally take a picture of myself. Like, I have so many weird pictures in my phone of me just being like...
Yep.
I guess that kind of goes with like the self-discovery type of thing, because you are actually trying to like reference yourself, and like you have to stare at yourself and like see what you look like. This sounds really weird, but there are a lot of like websites for artists.
That's right.
Where you can like, I don't want to say it, but
no,
I know
say it. I don't know what you're talking about.
I already know you know what I'm gonna say.
I know, yeah.
It's basically like, so in art school, you obviously from the jump you are seeing naked people left and right, because it's nude modeling. But online, there are a few websites where you can, if you can't do it in a class, you can just access nude models online, not, you know, it's literally, it's a legit website, but it is naked people, which I guess you could see in other forms as well, but this is particularly for drawing. So again, like you said, people don't have access to those types of resources all the time, and drawing from a computer, drawing from a screen is really not the same as drawing from life or drawing, you know, whatever. So I think using references and using tracing paper for whatever you need for practice, for a painting, for something official, I think should be fine, because it really doesn't even matter like how you get there.
That's right.
I think everything else should be authentic enough for it to be a legit piece. I obviously didn't think that this is what a person looked like in my head. I needed a reference. I needed to see like the proportions. I needed to see the specific placements, how gravity affects things. Like, those are all factors that we don't take into account when we're just freehanding things.
I remember that you said something that I thought was really original. You said that, and for the record, the pandemic situation was a lot worse at that time.
Right.
And we all spent a lot of time in isolation then. So I remember you said that you were really tired of using yourself as a muse.
Yeah.
And I thought of it more metaphysically, but probably you also meant literally using yourself as your own reference.
Yeah, that's funny. I forgot I said that, but it's very true.
What is your definition of muse? Like your personal definition of muse. What is it?
Well, I just think muse is a really roundabout way of saying like an inspiration. I think traditionally people like to think of it as like being a person. Typically a heterosexual woman that's, you know, and it's just like the tortured painter and he's like, oh, you're my muse. Like it's just like, it's so stupid and cringy, and I think that's what people think when they think of muse. To me, a muse has more to do with like experiences and just like things that aren't necessarily like tangible.
And now we're gonna wrap this up and take it on the road for something really fun.
Yeah, we thought it would be really interesting since you mentioned you struggled with finding a muse, and we also talked a lot today about what a muse, finding a muse means in today's world. So we thought it would be interesting if we actually take it to the field and try to find a muse for you.
Yeah, totally down. Yeah, it might be completely wrong. Maybe someone's like, okay, well, my muse is like whatever, my husband, and that's totally fine. Like, I get that. I think it can be like a person, place, experience, object, whatever. I think it's something that just like keeps being an inspiration for you in your life. For me, muse, or having a muse, has just been coming to terms with things sometimes. Again, like self-acceptance, acceptance of other people. I think in a lot of ways that's just been my muse, that's just been my inspiration. I think muse is, for me at least, just telling a story and telling an experience to make it easier.
I'm seeing a lot of what we talked about earlier when it comes to mixing references with drawing from life. Do you care to elaborate a little bit more in detail of like this piece and how you approached it?
Yeah, totally. So obviously this piece I wouldn't say is spatially correct, but I do like to do that when I'm painting outside or drawing outside, drawing from life. I think as long as you have a vague idea of where everything is, the rest is kind of like up to you. I mean, personally I think I leave the rest up to my artistic license. I'm sure that's like maybe a no-no to some people, but yeah, I really love the yellow in the leaves, so I think I exaggerated that a bit more and really tried to make my concentration sort of be surrounding that. I just love greenery.
I have some fun questions to ask, actually.
Cool.
Yeah, I guess whenever we're ready. If you could steal credit for any great work in history, art, film, whatever, which would you claim?
Oh man.
To say you did it.
Wouldn't even claim this because I think it's good or like necessarily like, oh, it's my favorite. But I feel like this was hammered into us, but Duchamp's The Fountain.
Oh, okay.
Like, I think that was such a pivotal point of like art history, mostly because it was like kind of introduced like found objects and turning it into art, and then the question like, can anything be art? Can you just declare to be an artist? Like during that time it was obviously very pertinent to like what art can and can't be. So if I could take credit for that, that'd be really cool. I think it really caused a lot of stir, which I love to do. I love the drama, you know, I love the drama and art, so
That's a great claim. That's a great claim.
Do you have one, Manny?
It's so hard because there's like so many things that I'm like, fuck, I guess it would be the invention of the comic newspaper strip, because that would influence the next hundreds of years of like media and entertainment.
yeah.
Just sometimes you have this closeness to certain artists that you feel like this is something I would do. And yeah, it would be, I don't know, something of Kafka.
Okay.
Because I really like absurdism.
What's the craziest idea for a dream work of yours? Unlimited money budget. What's your project?
Oh man, I have so many.
And you won't get in trouble for anything.
Make a giant sundial. The bridge between murals and like functionality. has like always interested me, and also just like art in like functional spaces. I would love to be like on a like muralist project where it's also just like a common space for people to just like enjoy their life.
I saw an artist statement for one of your pieces or a couple of your pieces on your website. If you don't mind me, I just read it so you understand it. And I think it was written in 2017, so I don't know if you strongly feel the same way or if it changed, but you would let me know.
Okay.
In a world where male sexuality is practically shoved down everyone's throats, this poses an even larger problem for women, because when a woman genuinely embraces her own sexuality for her own benefit, there is always going to be the underlying assumption that attention is the only motive for doing so. I wanted to explore the plethora of subject matter that makes people more comfortable than the idea of female sexuality. For example, terrorism, clan members, animal cruelty, blood, war, the president, etc. I wanted to physically and metaphorically show the subject matter covering up a representation of female sexuality, because it's not just limited to the idea of nudity.
I literally do not remember that artist statement. I'm like, where is this from? I have no... That's on my website, you said?
Yeah, I hope it's your website.
Is it? Maybe it's me. I have no idea. I don't remember. But I do agree with all.
So have you created any GIFs?
GIFs?
Yeah, like GIF digital art. And it also
How
says
did
that you
even find
used
that?
it also said that you used your own body for those GIFs.
Oh my god, yes! Oh my god, I totally forgot about that. I was literally... Okay,
I was like, I failed as a journalist.
Okay. So, before I moved to New York, I actually did a year, or a little less than a year. I was doing just like standard like formal classes at a university in Denver for art, in order to just kind of like transfer my credits, blah blah blah. So I was very young, and I think my like, I guess exploring just like my own sexuality and like being exposed to people who were also trying to do the same, and other artists who, I mean, not really like the trope, but like their whole gist was like really trying to dig deep into this and like what that even means, and if it's, you know, necessarily gender based. I do remember this GIF. It was for a specific class actually. And I wanted to make work that kind of was, that did speak on like the current state of the country, and I believe that was probably a year after Trump had been elected. And I'm trying to remember exactly what my thought process was, but I do remember this specific work, and I remember feeling, you know, that my body didn't really belong to me anymore. Speaking as someone that identifies as a woman, I did feel that, you know, my rights and my autonomy was consistently being violated, and now putting someone in office that had, you know, a slew of things that didn't work, really. Obviously we know that now, and we knew that back then. Obviously I was pretty young, and I wouldn't say misinformed, but now I am a lot more informed about sexuality and gender, and continue to learn about that, obviously, so you never stop learning. But I do still stand by that statement, and I just think it's there's a spectrum to everything. So I think female sexuality is not limited to like binary females, or, you know, people who have uteruses. Like, I don't think that's what a woman is, and I don't think that's what is limited to what a woman is. I think anyone who identifies as a woman, and anyone who identifies as you know, feeling those feelings and can understand what that's like. I think womanhood and sexuality and femininity and female sexuality are not just limited to that. I think there's a wide range of what that can look like, and so I think that makes it even more interesting, honestly, and probably just like furthers my point.
Do you still explore this theme in your work?
Yeah, definitely. I think again, like, I think it always starts with yourself. So I think, especially when I was kind of like in the middle of school, that was something that I was very interested in, because I was exposed to like really strong female artists, artists that identified as female, that really pushed that exploration of self and that exploration of sexuality and what it means, how gender plays into it. what our own thought, like what we all think that's supposed to look like, and our own stereotypes and our own kind of like I guess thoughts that were implemented into us when we were younger. I still really enjoy exploring that in my own work, but also just like viewing work that pushes that more, especially when it's like, again, from like lived experiences or like a narrative or a story.
What do you think are challenges for female or female identifying artists these days?
With that, it's really intertwined with like race issues as well, at least from not my own personal experience, but people that I'm close to, and like, again, like some of my best friends from school. I think I've seen the difference, is all I would say, is that I know the difference, and I can tell the level of like privilege, I think, and how having a step up in this world, in this industry, can really depend on literally who you are and like what you look like just to the average person. Those of us who are not white, who are maybe not necessarily affluent, whatever, I think that can be kind of a challenge, because I think those are two big things that can limit you. You know, unfortunately, it is kind of like sometimes it does feel like a male-dominated industry, like a lot of things, but being, you know, a woman and being maybe a woman of color is a second thing that you have to deal with, and a second barrier that you have to prove yourself against. You can get into like also other categories, you know, being able-bodied, that's another thing. So I think there are just a lot of barriers to cross. And unfortunately, sometimes it feels like really impossible to see those that actually achieved it, and think of yourself in their shoes.
And it's just really great to sit here and be in the moment and listen to these stories and experiences, and acknowledge, you know, some of the privileges I have in the art world, being a male, you know, and that there's like a level that you can get to. Like you said, there's so many various levels that you can do, like, you know, able-bodied people, straight white male, straight black male, or BIPOC, you know. It's just it's a lot about who you are and who you know sometimes in the art world, and it can be a little bit hard, but it doesn't mean that it's the law to be an artist, you know. There are definitely ways you can break through it, but the fact that we have to break through it kind of still sucks, realistically, you know.
What other themes do you feel strongly about?
I've never been to Colombia, which is so crazy. Obviously now it's like LOL, but at some point when it's okay, I'd definitely love to visit. So that's obviously like a big part of me that I like, there's a lot that I don't know. And there's a lot that I really wasn't exposed to, and a lot of that side of my family's like indigenous roots that I'm not familiar with at all. So I think that like that happens to a lot of people, and I think like, again, like doing your own research and like going out and like literally just looking it up and like reading about it is very helpful. But it's kind of like it was hard for me to like see where to start, because I was just like, I want to like pick like I want to like learn about cool artifacts, like Colombian artifacts that like I can have some sort of connection to, which for some reason it was this like funerary mask that I found so like, I don't know, I was just so like enthralled by it. I was like, this is also self-identity is like so weird and like tricky to even get around. I know we were talking earlier about how like labeling yourself is like such a strange practice. I do think that sometimes it is necessary to like kind of get a good foothold on like who you are. Not that it really defines you, but like having no idea like what your roots are like, or like what your family is like, is so strange. And so just even like trying to get to that point is like has been an interesting like journey for me. Just
Sophia, it was so interesting to talk to you. I think you have a lot going on in your life still in terms of self-exploration, just like any artist probably, but it was also really refreshing to hear it from an artist that is young, living in New York City, because this is where many of us end up, and I think it would be helpful for our audience to learn about your experience.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you guys for having me.
You're absolutely wonderful and talented, and we can't wait to see all the amazing projects that you have ahead.
Oh, thank you. That's so nice.
And with this, we are going to wrap up today's episode. Thank you so much for watching us, for watching Art Subway. If you like this episode, like, share, subscribe, and we'll create more. Thank you.